Hello and welcome to another edition of the Paranormal Concept Show, exclusive to the PA UK network. I'm your host, Paul Rook, and as always, I'm joined by the amazing Kerry Greenaway and Richard Clements.
Hello. Oh, we're amazing this week.
You're amazing this week.
We're amazing. Oh, my God.
You've done all my research for me.
Well, you've been a little bit busy yourself, haven't you?
Well, absolutely. I'm always busy, me. Fingers in pies.
Lots and lots of little pies.
Yeah.
Or big pies.
Apple pie is my favourite.
Yeah, well, it looks like you might have some interesting stuff coming up. But anyway.
Yeah, that's it. We definitely have. So, how have you guys been? Been up to much?
I've been all right. I've been out on my travels again. I went up to the lovely county of Norfolk during the week. Sort of the hottest day of the year, I think it was. Yeah. Perhaps not the best time to go, but no, I thoroughly enjoyed myself around the Thetford area. I went, had a walk in the woods, and went and visited a few sort of historic locations. So, yeah, I do like that part of the world very much. You don't have to walk too far before you come upon something else interesting to explore.
Yeah. And Kerry, you've been unlucky enough to go back to work.
Yes, I have. The shock to the system, I have to say. Yeah, physically knackered. Feet hurt all the time again. No, it's interesting. It's very interesting going back to work because although I've done the job for 15 years, I had 3 months off, and I kind of it's like you forget. It's like quickly you forget things. But yeah, it's been good. It's been good going back to work. I needed to get back to work. I'm not going to lie. I wanted that level of normality back, and I don't like to. I mean, everyone goes, "Oh yeah, it's great. You're getting paid 80% of your wages, and you can just sit around doing nothing." It doesn't sit right with me. You know what I mean? Yeah. That doesn't sit right with me. So to earn my own money, to actually earn it again is good. Yeah, it's very interesting times is all I can say on that one. Very polarised people. People are very polarised at the moment and in lots of different ways, you know, on lots of different issues out there at the moment. And it's a diplomatic quagmire is all I can say. Because I deal with customer services in my day job for people who don't know. And all sorts of things. It's not just about the selling process. People will talk about their lives and, you know, what matters to them and stuff. And that all comes to the fore. And it does make me, it never ceases to amaze me, I suppose, the different perspectives that are out there. And you have to be very diplomatic sometimes, yeah. But it's good to actually see different people, get out in the world and see different people from the people you live with, you know.
Yeah.
And obviously with social distancing in place, I'm seeing my parents now in the garden. Well, at least we've got the weather for that. We can get out in the garden with our loved ones and see them. And that's good. That's really good. You know, so things, although we're still having to be very careful out there, it's becoming a bit more normal for me, and I love it. I like my life. I like my life normally, and I didn't like the isolation, so I don't take well to that. So this for me is a positive time. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was. Talking of social distancing, you know, I was scrolling through social media and come up with this week's topic.
Yeah.
Well, to start off anyway. And it was about Roanoke.
Yeah.
And basically, you can't get any more social distancing than see it completely disappearing. Because that's sort of what we're going to be discussing anyway today. And obviously, I found this article and I thought, actually, that's a really good topic to discuss for the show. So I'll send it over to my wonderful researchers, Kerry and Richard. And they're going to tell us all about what they discovered.
All right, here we go.
Palmed off, I feel. It was a question of, what do you think of this, guys? Off you go. Yeah. Run with this one. No, to be fair, this is a fascinating mystery. It's all, you know, we talked about fact from fiction before, a very mythological road we went down on that one. This one, we're sort of looking at things that almost like mysteries and hoaxes and things like that. You know, it's that sort of sorting out the fact from fiction on that one. And this one is a fascinating one. The Roanoke or the Roanoke Island is actually, it is an absolutely fascinating one, because it does sort of, you can understand why people thought it was mysterious, people mysteriously vanished, but actually there's probably a very logical explanation that we're only just sort of finding out now. And it basically is a colony they were going right back to the 16th century on this one, when people were colonising. You know, we'd send a ship of people off to colonise, new worlds, effectively. You know, America was a new world back then. Although it had its own population of Native Americans, you know, it was a new world for the English, wasn't it, guys?
Well, yes, it would have been sort of like a land of sort of potential opportunity as well, you know. And as you said, Kerry, it was sort of the dawn of European expansion into the New World.
And exploration,
yeah.
Except in that, you've also got to incorporate, you know, you talk about a quagmire of diplomacy going on. That would have to be the same thing, because although you're from this country that's established civilization established that you know it runs how you are used to, and with rules and regulations and a hierarchy and all that sort of thing. These people have taken that, landed on a foreign shore that has its own native population, and just sort of expected to sort of just
take over.
Take shore. Yeah, you know, oh, this looks like a good place to have a settlement. Let's just settle here. You know, that in my head, if that happened now, it would be completely unacceptable.
Right? Yes, looking at it through modern eyes, yes, it would be.
Except back then, they felt that they had every right to do that. Now,
I think there was obviously different ways of doing it. I think, you know, some people were, like particularly the British, they would come in and try and take over and put the natives down. So, you know, sort of slaveries type of thing. I know that's quite prevalent in the press at the moment, but, you know, we would take the slaves and make them work for us, whereas some of the other countries would explore and they would politically work with the smaller villages that were there already. So they'd form these trade routes with different villages and things like that. So there was two ways of pretty much doing it, I think.
I think sometimes it starts okay. And then your priorities become more important than what you would perhaps consider more native, you know. And that's, you know, well, we're more advanced than you, so we are superior to you, and that's not the case at all, you know. I'm not saying that's right, but I'm just saying I think it depends on that. Because Roanoke wasn't, when they first settled, there have been other exploration groups that have gone, like there have been 2 other expeditions to this area before they actually sent settlers. So there had been communications with the local tribes. There was 2 tribes around there. That was the Wanchese and the Croatoan, tribes. One was very unfriendly, one was okay. So one saw the settlers as a threat, and the others were like embracing, because they could see the opportunities, you know, in trade between the things. So you've got this situation in this area going on anyway. But it's a very hard landscape. Where they chose to settle, it's very difficult for ships to get into shore. So you're having to do a lot of transportation between the two. And the 2 groups that had gone before had encountered difficulties with this beforehand. Why they then thought it was a good idea to send 120 settlers there, God only knows. But they did.
It is sort of, I've been sort of like going through this, and I've sort of known a little bit about this story before, and everything I've ever read, you know, it is the most inappropriate place to actually put a settlement. And but, you know, they seem to be quite persistent of actually going back there. I mean, why they didn't take the opportunity to sort of sail up shore a bit and sort of find a more suitable place, I do not know. But, you know, it's just seems to be the way it happened. Perhaps it's because they had communications, good relations with one of the local tribes that may have sort of swayed it, and perhaps they thought they could.
It could also be something to do with supplies as well. If they've only got enough supplies for, say, I don't know, 100 days on the sea, you know, if they run out, they don't want to be travelling a little bit further because they've already run out of supplies.
Possibly.
So that might be the point of no return sort of thing.
At the time, there may well have been a logical reason. In hindsight, we look at it and go, why would they do that? Do you know what I mean? But at the time, there was obviously some reason for it. Now, the area itself is very, very prevalent with resources that we would want, you know, like mineral resources and things like that. So it could be that that was closest to those mineral resources. As I say, scientific exploration that had been done on previous trips had highlighted this. So that's one of the reasons they wanted to settle there, is because there was a great resource that we could benefit from in England.
Yeah.
And that was natural resources, not people, I would like to add.
Yeah.
So that's one of the reasons they wanted that particular area. But I do agree with Richard, in hindsight, they could have gone to a more accessible area. It might have been harder to transport it on land back to their settlement, but that surely is easier than on sea, you know. I don't know. But it's one of those things. Anyway, they did choose to settle there. And, it didn't go too well, basically. When they first arrived, there was 120 English settlers, and this included women and children as well, not just men. You know, there was like 90 men and, you know, a certain amount of women and children that settled there. But before they even got on the island, transporting their supplies to set up their settlement between the ship and the land, they lost a lot of them. So it was hard times. This is hard to, you know, get the settlement going to start with. So they very quickly ran out of their supplies from the UK, managed to a degree on the land around, but it soon became very apparent that they needed further supplies from the UK to help, you know, to help them, basically. So one of the guys, John White, he went back to England to get more supplies, basically. They said, we haven't got any we can give you, but we can take you back. So he said, okay, I'm going to do that. So he went back, and it took him 3 years to get back to the Croatian area.
Okay. Yeah, because this is something else you have to look at, you know, sort of, it wasn't sort of, you know, sort of, this would take sort of years. So a simple sort of thing like, right, I'll go back to England and sort something out and then come back to you, you know. And as this is a very good point, it took 3 years.
For one reason or another, it took him a long, long time to get back.
Yeah.
When he got back, the village settlement was actually completely deserted.
Yeah.
Now, although it was completely deserted, it did look like they'd taken everything that they could.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a sign on a tree that said CRO, and then later he recalled that there was actually a wooden sign on one of the doors to one of the houses that said Croatian. But they didn't seem to explore any further. This is the bit that baffles me. Nobody's there. They've got two signs of what they are, you know, of where they possibly could have gone. And, you know, they know that there's a native tribe called the Croatoans. Logical assumption again at that point would be that's where they've gone. They've gone to the local natives for help because they're not surviving where they were. We don't know if that was because there was illness. We don't know if that was because, you know, they just were starving. We don't know. But logically, you would assume at that point that that's where they'd gone.
Yeah.
But it seems that no further explanation was done on that.
Those were the only two clues they actually had, and to sort of like not follow up on that does seem to be a bit unusual, but they may have had their sort of reasons. I don't know quite what, but, you know, we don't quite know how far the other tribes were actually away from this settlement, or whether they had any idea of where they actually were, and whether they were like nomadic or not, I don't know.
Now, there are various theories out there off the back of this. One was that the Wanchese tribe had come in and massacred the lot of them. There's no evidence of that. There's in the original transcribes of what John White was saying, there was no, that's not what was said. So that's an assumption.
Yeah.
Because there's no evidence of that. But there's no evidence that they went to the Croatian tribe either, because they didn't bother to go and have a look. You'd think he would, because one of them was his wife and his daughter. So you would think he would have actually made the effort. But again, you've got to think, was he told no because, you know, the supplies on the ship, that wasn't the mission of the ship, the captain of the ship could have overridden John White, you know, your settlement's not here, sorry mate, we've got to go and do this now. You don't know quite know all the ins and outs of it. Anyway, this kind of went down as a mystery and has sort of prevailed through history, and it got picked up in 1937 in a play called The Lost Colony. And this was actually played at North Carolina. And it's really since then that the mystery of this has sort of like taken legs, as it were. The conspiracy theory of Roanoke Island has sort of like grown legs from then. And it's been like this mystery that's unsolved in history. Where did all these people go? A bit like the Marys, you know, when we were talking about lost ships. You know, it's that sort of theory. There's quite probably a logical explanation, yet everyone's jumped to, it's a mystery. I'm surprised somebody hasn't said that UFOs came down and abducted all of them at some point.
I'm sure they have.
I reckon somebody called the Earth.
But, yeah, it is sort of, as you said, Kerry, I mean, this mystery has been put on it a lot later, and even though it was probably a bit of a mystery at the time, I mean, sort of disappearing sort of villages and inhabitants was not that uncommon, sort of like during the sort of like the Middle Ages and stuff like that. Even here in the UK, we had the Barbary pirates that would come up from North Africa, and it was not that uncommon for like and for them to raid Cornish and fishing villages to sort of steal the whole population away and into slavery, and there are reports of this actually happening. So if you would have come across this, especially the other side of the Atlantic, it probably was not much of a big deal to the authorities. I think, well, they've gone missing, so what?
It's probably quite, in all honesty, back in that time of exploration, probably wasn't an unusual occurrence. You take your life in your hands, you know, going to a country that far away. It's probably one of those situations where the people in the UK are going, nothing we can do about it, it's too far away. We're not going to spend the time and resources searching for people when we know that there's, you know, native tribes around that area. Their lives are in their hands. It's one of those things kind of scenario. You know, back in the 1600s, like we say, it's not an easy passage, is it?
No, and I should imagine at the time they probably did have a fair idea of what happened, but they just, as you said, Kerry, they just put it down to one of those things. It happens. It
happens, yeah. And that's the chance you take when you go and sort of like set up life in a brand new country. However, I mean, there are various theories. One was that they got wiped out by disease, but again, what they found when they did find the colony empty doesn't back up that, because if it was disease, then you would think there would be evidence of
there'd be bodies or graves or something, wouldn't there?
Yeah, you'd think so. You would think that if it was a violent attack by the Wanchese tribe, then that would be evidential as well there. So effectively, they just disappeared off the face of the earth. But most archaeologists believe that they dispersed because it just wasn't working where they were, so they went and dispersed to various areas.
Yeah, and it seems they did actually, from reading the accounts and stuff, I mean, they did actually take stuff with them. There was sort of like the normal, everyday sort of mundane sort of stuff was sort of gone as well. So it does seem that there was concerted effort to actually pack up and leave.
Yeah. Now, it's really interesting because archaeology now think they have found evidence that that's exactly what happened. They dispersed because they've found artefacts that could only have come from those kind of settlers in areas that we know were camps for the Native American tribes. So, there is evidential archaeological evidence, is what I was searching for there, that actually back this up now, which for me is fascinating, because you're thinking like this happened in the 1600s, and only now we just finding the evidence to back that up with. That's just fascinating to me, that somebody is, and when we was looking at this, some of the tech that they use is phenomenal, isn't it? They do like geospheres and they do like drone zoning and all sorts of things.
That's just it. I mean, that's the point of investigating, isn't it? Because if you take any legend or myth, like for example Roanoke, it's like 300-400-year-old mystery, and you look into the lay of the land, you look into like geology, look into where all the other settlements were, what logically could have happened to the settlement, and it does sort of all tie together, and you can make an educated guess as to what happened, and you just go and investigate that area and piece together the bits of the puzzle, and then in the end you'll end up with a full picture.
Well, because and especially now, and as Kerry was pointing out, it really is an exciting time to be an archaeologist, because the tech they're getting now with LiDAR and sort of landscapes and scanning and stuff, they are sort of really are pulling back the layers of history now and sort of finding stuff in places they never thought they ever would. Particularly sort of down in South America, relatively recently. I believe it was a schoolboy online was looking at some LiDAR pictures, which are sort of scanned pictures, and he actually is credited of discovering a whole city in the Amazon rainforest through looking at it. So...
Isn't it astonishing? I mean, we were talking last week with Nicola White, who does mudlarking, which again, it was another little, it's a very small scale, but it just fascinated me what she was picking up, that those levels of history, just on the foreshore, and archaeologists are doing this on a much grander scale with lots of more tech, and finding things that we just. It's incomprehensible, isn't it? That 400 years later, they're finding the village and then finding the artefacts that back up that these people did exactly what was logical to do at the time, and stuff like that. It's just amazing, really, isn't it?
And I think with this new technology, especially sort of looking for old native sort of settlements and stuff, they lived in more harmony with the land, and their sort of structures weren't the permanent structures like European structures and would have been. It's quite easy to go out and find remains of old sort of huts and sort of old buildings and stuff, but I believe like the native populations, their sort of camps and sort of built up areas were a lot more harmonious with the surrounding nature and stuff, and it's only now we can actually sort of like locate them through the more advanced technologies we've got, because their footprint that they leave is very subtle.
Yeah.
You wait, it'll only be a matter of time before they have some sort of satellite that does it for us. You just tap into the computer what you want to look at, sends it to the satellite will fly over to wherever you want your image. It'll focus down and it'll say, oh yeah, the burial mound you want is just there. And it pinpoints it for you.
Well, we sort of got that already.
I was going to say, we're not far away from that, are we?
No, exactly. It's only a matter of time, isn't it? And we could just discover everything that's been buried and lost all over the globe.
Amazing. It's absolutely
or
amazing.
the flat Earth, whatever way you want to look at it.
I think the other thing to consider with this is like the natives know the flora and fauna of the area very, very well. They know what you can eat, what you can't eat, what's going to kill you. You know, you don't touch that animal, but you can touch that one. That one's just for show. The markings are just for show. This one is actually really poisonous. Don't touch it. When you go into that kind of environment, you haven't got a clue. I mean, all right, you've had some level of scientific exploration go on beforehand, but scientific explanation is completely different from living it, I would say. There's a huge difference between science discovery and actually making use of that scientific discovery. It's a completely different world, although very useful. They go hand in hand, I would say, but living it's different. And it's completely alien, isn't it? All their flora and fauna is completely alien to what they've come from in the UK, because every flora and fauna is unique to its own environment.
Yeah.
I mean, that we're sort of going through a stage of exploration now, just like we did in the 1500s. Because they were going off exploring new countries and saying new worlds and stuff. But we're actually now at the stage where we can start looking into space, and the rocket that went up a couple of weeks back. That's just a precursor to the mission to Mars, isn't it? I think.
Oh, no idea. You follow that more than I do.
Yeah, I think it's like a precursor to the manned mission to Mars.
Well, they keep threatening it, but I think
exploring that, and again, it really will be a journey to a new world. And it's an exciting time now because we're going through that. So that what they went through in the 1500s, we're sort of going through, more modern, but the same thing. New exploration.
New exploration. It's almost like, right, who wants to settle on Mars? We've got space for 120 people.
Yeah,
and this is this. It's a completely alien environment to what you're coming from.
Boldly going where no man has gone before.
I think you have to admire them. You have to admire their bravery. I mean, that's a very courageous step.
It is.
Yes. They would have had all sorts of motivations for going, so you would have had your adventurers, perhaps your dreamers, and people especially during the 16th century, a lot of people would have left for religious reasons, through religious persecution. There's a lot of that going on here in England at the time, and they saw, when news of the New World sort of first started to spread, they actually sort of put a biblical spin on it and said that this was the new promised land.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very interesting. But as I say, a whole mythology grew up around this this story of mysterious people missing on Roanoke Island. And actually, there's a very logical explanation. And actually, when you break it down, it's quite rational explanation as well. And now we're actually finding the evidential artifacts that back that up as well.
Yeah.
Now there is an artifact that we wanted to get Andy Mercer on the show because he's very emphatic about this one. Doesn't like this topic at all. But we're going to talk about it. Unfortunately, Andy couldn't join us. Now this is something that came to my attention way back a few years ago, and I didn't quite know what to make of it. It's a manuscript. It's called the Voicelink Manuscript. I never know if I'm saying that right either. Now, this is a manuscript that first turned up in an antique shop, effectively a bookseller's store, and it's a very strange manuscript. Whatever way you look at it, it's a strange one. It's got writing that people say they can't decode. It's got pictures of flora and fauna and mermaids and bare-breasted women and various notations of code that nobody can work out what it is. It's a fascinating piece of work to look at. So we wanted to have a look at this. Is it fake or is it real? Because, a lot of people say it's fake, it ain't real, and all this. There, again, a whole conspiracy theory has built up around this manuscript in itself, and it has baffled scholars and academics alike for many years. Now, some people say that it is a complete fake. It was made by the guy in the antique shop, Wilfred. It was made by him, and it doesn't go back any further, but it has been dated. It has been carbon dated back to the 1500s again.
Yeah.
It actually first appeared at the court of Rudolph II, and allegedly it was accompanied by a letter which stated it was the work of Roger Bacon.
Right.
Okay, so that's very first. That was 1586. So we are going back a few years. So this book has been knocking around for a long time, right?
Yeah, 16th century, so yeah.
But it's very esoterical in nature, I would say. It has things like, just looking at the language and the illustrations, weird plants, strange objects, zodiac symbols. It sort of encompasses a whole sort of like, what is it? Because that's half the problem with this book, is you can't go, it's a botanical book, because it's not just a botanical book. You can't just say it's based on esotericism, because there's more in it than that. Do you know what I mean? It's a whole mishmash of lots of different things, and nobody has been able. I say nobody, quite a lot.
Could it not just be like a notebook? I mean, if he had an interest in, what's the word? Not myths, but strange and weird and wonderful things that people have claimed they discovered. So he could like draw the picture of whatever plant it was, or the mermaid, or whatever it was, and then he could go out and do his own research. And the writing could just be his version of shorthand.
I think the problem is with that, if it was just a notebook, you'd see mistakes in it.
Yeah.
Or where you've crossed words out, and there isn't any of that to be just a notebook. I think it's gone to the next...
Maybe he died before he could edit it.
I think it's gone to the next step beyond notebook, if that makes sense. Because we were talking about this before off air, which was, that's one of the problems with the book, is that there's no mistakes in there. But like I said, if you look at some of the ancient medieval religious texts that were done by the monks and Benedictines and stuff like that, they would actually throw away a sheet and redo it if they made a mistake.
Yeah, the scribes would. And what you've got to remember is this Voicelink manuscript does predate the printing press as well. And what a lot of people don't seem to understand is all books before then were handwritten and hand-scribed. And if somebody wanted a copy of a book, they would usually employ a scribe to go to the original book and handwrite it for them. I mean, and that's how it was done. And these manuscripts back in the day were very expensive. You had to be a very wealthy man to actually own books back then, or what we now call
Could
books.
you imagine it if you'd written a bestseller?
Yeah, God, you'd be flat out, yeah.
And I think because of the way the book is, I completely understand what you're saying, Paul. I do think it's more to do with that than anything else. I think it's somebody's personal guide to their own research. Now, bearing in mind, you've also got to remember they were very... the step between science and folklore was very blurred.
Yeah.
You know, we've talked about this before. You know, they would believe omens and, you know, worship idols and deities and believe that certain elements, you know, the fire, air, earth and water elements, very prevalent, particularly when you're looking at medical side of things. It was very herbcraft. And it wasn't just herbcraft. They believed if you picked a plant at a certain particular time of year, we work in this way, very Wicca way, actually. The witchy way. It's very folklore medicine. And if you encompass all of those factors together, that might give you an answer as to what this book was.
Yeah, sort of like research that has been done on it, and from the sort of more serious researchers, and they do tend to sort of agree it probably points towards some sort of woman's sort of health book of some sort. Yeah.
Not necessarily women, I'd say people's, you know, like that medical journal, a personal, almost notebook, but without mistakes, you know, so somebody's probably got all of these notes and then has put it into a book. So that's why there's no mistakes, because he's sort of just like transferred it over in pure with illustrations, which outlines the folklore side of medicine effectively, which is why you've got like things like the zodiac in there, and you've got strange symbols in there, and you've got this, that and the next in there. And as I say, but unfortunately, because people can't seem to understand it because it's written in an unknown language, and many people have looked at this, then that is why it becomes, we don't know what it is. I've even said, we talked about the alien thing, abduction thing on the Roanoke. This has actually got, people believe that this is something to do with aliens.
Well, yeah, I was looking at illustrations of the book. Actually, there's plenty online. You can go and sort of like, you can buy facsimiles of the book from Amazon even, and and if it was the aliens that sort of done it, you would have thought they'd done a better job.
But this is what I mean by
Drawing and
conspiracy theories. Like, we don't understand it. It's got things we don't understand. It's got to be alien,
Gotta be
right?
alien.
It's got to be
Yeah.
alien, right? However, there is a history researcher and television writer that has apparently looked at this work extensively and believes he's cracked the code.
oh,
I know. His name is Nicholas Gibbs. And he believes it is a kind of medieval Latin shorthand. Now, again, as we were talking before the show, shorthand, you can get taught it. You can go and do a shorthand course, right?
there is a basic,
Yeah.
yeah.
But majority of people who I know who do it as a job sort of have made their own kind of shorthand.
Yes.
They kind of have tailored it to their own understanding. Only they can read it, kind of thing, you know. It's one of those, right?
Yeah, as I was sort of like talking before show about shorthand, my nephew's a journalist, and he had to learn shorthand, and when he sits in court taking court notes and stuff like that, and he was saying to me that now he's perfected it to his own sort of way, that nobody else can read it. It's just prompts for him, no one else.
Yeah. Well, Gibbs was saying that he first looked at it and he had sort of like, he'd looked at ancient medical guides and medieval Latin. He's got very good experience in both of those. And so after he was looking at it, he started to see a common form of medieval Latin abbreviation that linked to medical texts from around this time about herbs.
Yeah.
Yes.
This is sort of where it came from.
Yeah, he sort of looked at other manuscripts. So I'll take it he's looked at other medical manuscripts or herbal and manuscripts from the time and sort of seen a pattern, which is in the Voicelink manuscript compared alongside these other manuscripts.
Yeah, and like recipes for, you know, concoctions to deal with certain medical conditions, things like that. So
Didn't you also say that this has also gone to code breakers
yeah,
and they couldn't decipher it, but this bloke could?
no, but if it's a personalised form of shorthand,
Yeah, but code breakers surely would have thought, oh yeah, there is a pattern in there, because that's what they're looking for when they do the code breaking. They're always looking for patterns.
it's okay if you know, like when. Okay, let's look at code breaking. I'm not an authority on this, but if you've got right, going to the code breakers of Bletchley, which is apparently one of the areas it went to, then when you first start with the code, you have a starting point, so you know you're looking for a known language.
Yeah.
Right, so go to World War II. They were looking for German language within a load of numbers.
Yeah.
But they couldn't work out how and it's working out what numbers or sequence of numbers relate to what letter.
Yeah, but they're still looking for a pattern.
Code. They're looking for a pattern,
that's
but if you see a pattern, that doesn't necessarily give you a translation.
You need the key, and with like people like Turing, and when he was sort of like really sort of like involved in Bletchley, it took them a fair while, but they will only need about 2 or 3 sort of single letters, and if they could get those, that would lead to the breaking of the whole code. You need to break into the code. You just need a slight entrance way in, and then the rest usually falls into place. So that was sort of the main focus. But if this book was personal to one individual that lived back in the 16th century, you're going to find it very difficult to find out what his key to this code was.
Yeah.
Very difficult, I should imagine.
I would imagine it's probably nigh on impossible because it's so individualised to that one person. So unless you knew that one person and had an idea of how they shorthanded effectively, you've got no frame of reference, have you?
Because with military code breakers, they do have a vague idea of what they're actually looking for. Military sort of and communications and stuff like that. They do know how it's supposed to follow. It's just
but
getting the key to break in.
There is still going to be a pattern, unless this person has done random codes for each letter. Then, it's going to be impossible. But then you're still looking for a pattern, because once you've got the pattern, and you could guess, as you said, 1 or 2 letters, then the rest will fall into place. So it's all about looking for patterns.
He did. Yeah,
I'm not saying that they were finding patterns, but they couldn't break into the pattern. They couldn't. Right, okay. And they didn't have the key sort of letters or whatever to actually break into it.
But he did have a pattern because of his knowledge in regard to ancient medical texts. So those patterns started to make sense. And you've got to think, ancient medical texts is probably, somebody who specialises in that is, very few and far between. You've probably only got 5 or 6 experts in the world on that specific area.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And this one just happened to look at the Voicelink manuscript. He said that the standard pattern of words used in a text called the Herbarium Apulaeus Platonicus, whatever.
Platonicus, yeah.
He started to see the abbreviations and patterns in language of the Voicelink matched the same as in that book, which gave him a clue as to what the text was. And once he realised what the text was, he could then look at it with those eyes, and then that became more understandable to him because he has got that knowledge in that initial text. And it was very common for scribes to reproduce older texts to preserve them. So if you've got somebody who's taken an older text, used that off the back of his own research, written his own work in shorthand method, you could see how this book has sort of like evolved for one person's individual needs, and the language becomes unknown to everybody now because it wasn't written in standard Latin.
No.
It's abbreviated to the point of individualism. But then, like you said about patterns started to occur to to Gibbs, who then was looking at it and going, okay. So I know this book inside out, this Herbarium, whatever it was called, Apulaeus. I could never say it, so I sort of don't remember it. He then sort of starts looking at the Voicelink and starts seeing patterns. That's the only word. So he's seeing the pattern rather than somebody who's got no knowledge of these ancient medical texts looking at it. It's gobbledygook. It doesn't represent Latin, doesn't represent any known language that we know from standardised language throughout the ages across cultures.
But isn't it in the manuscript there is actually sort of legible Latin text in it? More like sort of margin notes and stuff like that. Didn't I read that in the research?
Quite possibly.
Quite
possibly. Coupled with the pictures, bearing in mind there's a lot of weird and wonderful pictures in there as well. How do they relate to the text becomes down to translation of esotericism. Do you know what I mean? So it's symbols basically. So if you had a naked woman in a bath, it's to do with that sort of thing. Do you know what I mean? Maybe gynecological things.
Yeah.
Because baths used to help, or back in the day they used to say have a bath. The Romans were very fond of bath water. Taking a dip would cure all ills kind of thing. And even the Victorians, to be fair.
Well, yeah. You'd always go and take the waters, wouldn't you? Down at the local spa.
So he was very representative, and in his imagery, whoever wrote this, in his imagery, in regards to the text he was writing. So when you start looking at it, and it's a double thing. So symbology and translation of image against text, and your medical expertise in ancient medical text, it suddenly starts to become clear.
Yeah.
But again,
Well, I think
very
maybe
few
people were just
would know
overthinking.
this. Yeah, I think most people looked at it and overthought it.
Oh, yeah. They probably looked at it and think, oh, we've got pictures of plants that nobody recognises. I mean, you know.
If I drew a daisy, I can guarantee you wouldn't recognise it as a daisy.
And is that what he's trying to sort of like convey? I mean, there's a lot, you know, because we tend to look at books now through modern eyes and how we look at a book. But sort of during the 16th century and before, and these manuscripts meant a lot more. They were a lot more than just sort of, you know, a book.
Yeah.
They were a journey, you know, you went into them. They were a journey which had destinations and you sort of went places and stuff.
Like
And
the never-ending story.
Yeah.
I think the problem with this one is I don't believe it's a fake per se. I think a lot of fake information is around about the Voicelink manuscript. I think a lot of people's expert opinions has been put on it when they're not really that bothered. They've just sort of had a quick look at it. It didn't make any sense to them, so they're like, whatever.
Oh,
You know what I
well,
mean?
whatever, yeah.
And also the person who, when it first came to mainstream media, his particular character, shall we say, is a bit shady.
Yeah.
You know, I think that his, you know, Wilfred's character is very shady, which makes you jump to that assumption that it's an outright modern fake. But as I say, it has been carbon dated, so they don't believe it's a modern fake. They believe it is as old as they think it is. However, it's not as untranslatable as people have thought. It's just how you look at it, with what eyes you look at it.
Yeah.
And it's all a question of perspective on this one.
It seems to contain a lot of recognisable sort of images and stuff, sort of vaguely unrecognisable, but not quite there, you know. So the person that wrote it obviously used a lot of licence in himself, and it's, you know, to me it's quite clearly just a personal sort of journal of some sort, whether it be medical, which it looks like it probably is. And let's face it, a lot of people back in them times were very interested in sort of medical sort of theory and stuff like that, and wanting to find out how the body worked and
it wasn't
stuff
just
like
medical.
that.
It wasn't just medical either that they were interested in. It was botany as well, and you know, this book, this manuscript seems to have a bit of everything, as you said.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's talks of it coming into the hands of John Dee and, you know, people like that, and they reckon that some of the notations in the left-hand corner or whatever is written in by John Dee. There's nothing to back that up with. In all honesty, when we looked at the timeline of what we do know about the Voicelink, it doesn't. Like I say, there's a lot of conspiracy theories and stuff that's come up about this, and assumptions. Oh, it was written by this person, it was written by that person, it was actually done by John Dee or John Kelly, it was done this person, that person, you know what I mean? But we do know certain things about this manuscript now that we didn't know before. And again, it's finding the fact from the fiction. It's about breaking it down and looking into it. And Nicholas Gibbs does seem to have had the right knowledge to look at this.
Yeah. Of all the people,
with the right eyes. Yeah, the right person,
with the
right
right
place,
eyes.
the right time, looking at it with the right expertise.
Yeah, and I think any sort of unusual manuscript that crops up around the 16th century, people are usually very keen to put Dee's name to it just to give it a bit of provenance and a bit of mysticism for other reasons. You know, I mean, he certainly wasn't the only person going around at the time writing stuff and bits and pieces. I mean, there's a lot of other people doing it as well.
Yeah, and you know, you've got this book, you don't know how to pitch it. What better than to build up a great big story about, you know, the great occultist John Dee had this in his hands, and it boosts the price up, you know, for all those people that, you know, are interested in that sort of thing. It's still hugely interesting, but again, it would only be interesting to the right person rather than a more broader spectrum of person.
It seems it took a clear-headed academic to actually look at it with no sort of hang-ups, with no sort of agendas or personal bias, just to look at it, saw it for what it was. Sort of, he let the manuscript lead to its natural sort of conclusion, even though it hasn't been fully deciphered. You know, he sort of followed the breadcrumbs, so to speak, and he sort of delivered his sort of like opinion based on other works at the time.
I think he had the right expertise to recognise certain factors in it, though, as well. And sometimes that's all it takes, is the right knowledge to look at something and know what it is, in all honesty. Right person, right place, right time.
So it's not written by, you know, the aliens from planet Zob, then? That is a disappointment.
It doesn't look like it.
Guide.
I know. Now, there's another mystery that is, oh my goodness me, this is a huge economy in its own right. And I actually kind of like, I'm a bit reluctant to bring this to the table because I do feel we would need a proper ripperologist, which we may well do. We may well get a proper ripperologist on. It's Jack the Ripper. Now, there are many candidates for who the Jack the Ripper was, right? Many candidates. And in fact, it seems that every few years a new one pops up on the scene, right?
Well, yeah, it's certainly there's certainly a big cottage industry out there with Jack the Ripper. You've got to admit it, and you know, and it's just fuel for the fire. You know, a new person gets added every sort of 5 years on average. I think it is. You know, a new suspect and stuff.
I know, right?
So who's the latest suspect?
Well, the one that seems to be trending at the moment is H.H. Holmes. Right?
No, it wasn't him.
There's a lot of people that think it was.
Yeah, well, they're wrong.
In fact, there's a gentleman called Jeff Mudgett who claims that his great-great-grandfather H.H. Holmes was, in fact, Jack the Ripper. Now, he bases his understanding of this on 2 diaries he actually inherited from Holmes. And it basically details the participation in murder and mutilation of numerous prostitutes in London. Now, he also claims that the bloke that they hanged in 1896 was not Holmes, that it was somebody else.
Yeah, doppelganger type sort of scenario. Yeah, that's...
But let's take a little look at whether or not H.H. Holmes was actually Jack the Ripper. Now, we know H.H. Holmes is famous for being a serial killer that terrorised Chicago and owned a 3-story hotel that basically is set up into a maze of, like, death traps, right? The Murder Hotel. Everyone's heard of that one. Okay, or the Murder Castle, I think it was called. And he admitted to 27, but they actually think it's in excess of 200 people. Now, he was always fascinated, H.H. Holmes himself was actually always fascinated by death. He allegedly mutilated animals, stole corpses, and eventually seduced and murdered numerous women to satisfy his urge. And it was money-based. His killing was always money-based.
Yeah, so there's always a financial incentive for him to do what he did.
There was always a financial incentive. However, people say that he was Jack the Ripper. But I think, on this one, motive never changes. When somebody kills, a serial killer kills, they generally have a standard way of working. It might evolve, but it will always have you can see the evolution.
Even today, when they put appeals out on TV for, you know, sort of certain individuals and stuff, I mean, the police today, they still go on sort of like a psychological profile and a modus operandus, and they do seem to be individual to certain people. And they will discard sort of certain events or certain sort of murders, saying, well, no, because the way this has happened is totally different from the way the others. We believe these are related, but this one isn't. Yeah.
Now, I think you have to look at that. I think you have to look at why serial killers murder, to start with, and secondly, how they murder.
Yes.
That those 2 factors are the most important factors to pinpoint the same murder for the same serial killer. That's standard, I think. And as I say, even though there might be an escalation, there will be certain things that will remain the same.
Yeah, it all comes down to sort of like psychology and stuff, which is more or less now an accepted science, isn't it? So I think we can look at that as quite as taken. And you have to trust in that.
If you look at Jack the Ripper, he was very opportunistic. He
certainly,
in the open. He murdered prostitutes, he murdered prostitutes.
And they were skin.
Pardon?
And they were skin.
They didn't have any money. They were really poor people. He's opportunistic. He does it out in the open, out on the streets. He doesn't do it behind closed doors. There's only one of the murders he did behind closed doors.
Mm-hmm.
His attacks were frenzied, although there was some seemingly medical knowledge behind that frenzy. If you look at the last murder, although it's behind closed doors, it was a frenzied attack.
Well, I was sort of like looking at this in the notes, and he did seem to have a basic sort of operation, didn't he? He would actually sort of strangle the women first, and then that would obviously be to silence them, and to sort of, and then he would go about doing his autopsy or whatever it is he done afterwards. Apart from the last attack, which looking at it, you could quite possibly argue whether it was him that actually done it.
There was quite a risk factor there with Jack the Ripper when you think about it. Somebody could have walked upon him at any moment. Whereas H.H. Holmes worked in private. He preferred to do it in a very rational, meticulous way. He'd set up this hotel, in a specific way to perform his job, as it were. It's a very different way of working if you think about it.
The motive.
He would isolate his victims. He didn't want to do it in private. He wanted to take his time about it. Being frenzied wasn't really in the character of H.H. Holmes.
If you were to succumb to H.H. Holmes, it's definitely, you get the feeling is you would have probably been in his presence or known, for a good 2 or 3 days beforehand. Must have been, whereas Jack the Ripper sort of is certainly more sort of opportunistic. He probably went out, he probably wasn't selecting victims, then stalking them and stuff like that. His sort of modus and operandus does seem to be like he would go out that evening. He probably had a rough idea where people would be, where his preferred victims would hang out, so to speak, and then he would just go and just grab one off the street. Whereas Holmes is more, a hotel, you have to book into a hotel, you would have come into contact with him a long time before you would have become his victim.
I mean, H.H. Holmes had medical training. He was a trained medic. And they assumed that Jack the Ripper was too, because obviously he removed some of the organs, which is why people believe it's the same person. That's one of the reasons. Now, another thing to consider was he was, again, to show he was very meticulous, Holmes was, in a paper trail. And they can trace his movements quite effectively through his business documents. Except there is a gap. There is a gap between 1888 and 1889 where the paper trail goes mysteriously quiet, apparently.
Right.
And this actually coincides with the same time frame of Jack the Ripper in London.
Yeah.
Right, so that's why they say it's him, because this paper trail has gone very quiet at that time, so that's another reason. But that doesn't mean to say he was in London. There is a name of H. Holmes on a ship that went from London to New York, and this is another reason why they've jumped the assumption that H. Holmes was in London, because there's this H. Holmes that got on a ship at the same time the murders stopped, back to the United States, but
that is quite a far leap of assumption. I mean, the transatlantic trade back then in passenger cargo, sort of immigrants going travelling, I mean, it was huge, and people haven't, why they would even consider that as they're clutching at straws there.
Mm-hmm. I think it's a jump of assumption. It's very,
Yeah.
it is very convenient. Don't get me wrong; it fits beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
It fits beautiful. But we all know that facts, although they may seem,
it's circumstantial, isn't it?
yeah, would it stand up in a court of law?
I'm sure if you look at the London census of 1888, you'll find someone in the East End named Richard Clements. I mean,
Yeah, was you
it's
there?
Jack
Was
the
you
Ripper
Jack
me.
the Ripper? Yeah, was you?
Richard,
Did you
you're not
time
that
travel?
old. Come on. Yeah, Richard, you're not that old. Come on. Not even I'm buying that.
There's a lot of talk about the Dear Boss letter as well, that apparently linguistic experts have looked at the letter and said that it was written by an American because of the quirks and I don't know how they analyse these things, but the language in the Dear Boss letter that Jack the Ripper's supposed to have written. But
I think the giveaway was when he said, "Oh, I left the victim on the sidewalk."
Yeah.
Well, they have given it to the linguistics, as you say, and they sort of do tend to point towards that perhaps it could have been an American that actually wrote it. But again, that really doesn't prove anything.
Quite possibly an American did write it. Doesn't mean it was H.H.
Yeah.
Holmes.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? There was a lot of talk about the media at the time writing the letters to whip up the frenzy of Jack the Ripper. I mean,
Wouldn't be the
lot of
first time
letters-
they've done that.
No, well, exactly right. We're just a lot more aware of it these days. But, you know, the media are renowned for whipping up a sensation or a situation. We see it all the time now. And they were no different back in the Victorian period. They loved a good sensation. You know,
yeah.
we've all seen another wicked murder on London streets, kind of call
Wasn't
boy.
there one of the Jack the Ripper suspects? Wasn't he? They reckon he went.
Already have a podcast? It's time to join Spreaker's monetization program, the easiest way to profit from your passion starting on day one. You decide which episodes and exactly where you want the ads to be inserted, and Spreaker takes care of the rest. If you're not on Spreaker, it's easy to import your podcast in just a few clicks, and then you can monetize your older episodes too. For one free month on a pro account, visit Spreaker.com/monetize. That's SPREAKER.com/monetize to join and start making money today.
Over to America. I can't remember what one it was though.
Well, perhaps it was this one you're
Maybe
thinking
it was
of.
this one you're thinking of, yeah.
Possibly, yeah.
I mean, there's so many sort of stories and theories around the Jack the Ripper. I mean, I don't sort of follow the Jack the Ripper story much anyway. I just leave it pretty much as is from my sort of point of view. I mean, I know other people are more sort of interested and sort of do donate a lot of their time and effort on Jack the Ripper. But for me, you know, I just leave it as pretty much a mystery, and I take all these sort of little side notes and sort of these interesting quirks as just that, you know, interesting to read about. So that's about it. We know at least someone done it. That's far as
we know that was a real
I'm
person
prepared.
that did it, yeah, because there's a conspiracy theory about that too. But
Yeah.
the other thing was they have actually done a forensic sketch of the person that was supposed to have been Jack the Ripper, that was seen by allegedly 13 people who'd actually seen the Ripper victims with men just before they died. Remember, everybody, this is Victorian London. There is smog. There is not clear air. There is not street lighting like we know it today. It is not clear. You've got 13 witness statements from this period of history in a very poor area that's generally prostitutes, drunks, you know, those kind of people out on the streets. You know, they are giving a witness statement of what somebody looked like. And they've taken these 13 witness statements and made a sketch of the person. Basically, think bowler hat moustache.
Gosh, that's about it, really, isn't it?
Could be anybody.
But you think about it, you know, they think, oh, it's shocking. There's 15 witness statements of prostitutes seen with men. What?
Yeah.
I mean, hang on.
Not as diverse as today's society, where you could probably get a different sort of variety. It's everyone's looking very similar, I would say, in the dark, in the smoke.
Yeah.
Now they reckon that the portrait that they came up with actually looks like H.H. Holmes, and I kind of go, really? On that one, you would take that as evidence? I think
was
you
this
would be on shaky
portrait
ground.
and was this experiment or this portrait done with the knowledge that they were looking into the H.H. Holmes story as a possible suspect for Jack the Ripper?
Yeah.
You've got that. That's confirmation bias just there, isn't it?
Well, Mudgett and Fox, who the two guys who wrote the, from off the diaries and stuff. So you've got the great-great-grandson and have actually commissioned the forensic sketch artist for this one.
Yeah.
So
we're writing a book. We need a sketch from these descriptions, and
So that's why I don't believe it's H.H. Holmes. I think the modus operandus is totally different. You have to look at that before you look at any other fact. I don't think there's enough evidence in regards to the business trail, the paper trail. I just don't believe that one. But what do I know? I wasn't there. I didn't see it from my own two little eyes. But that is a theory that is out there. But I think we can safely say that one is motivated by monetary gain in the same way H.H. Holmes killed in that one. We're actually going to take a quick break right now.
Before we go for the break,
right, sorry.
Just out of curiosity, who do you think, out of all the suspects, did it?
Personally, I'm a huge fan of the water seeker. I'm a huge
Richard,
fan of that
one.
And as I stated earlier, I don't really know enough about the Ripper sort of case to even sort of bring up a potential suspect. I don't pay much attention to it, to be quite honest.
I've always thought it was the Kaminsky, the Russian fella.
See, that's very compelling. It's a very compelling argument too, and one that Andy, Andy, but that's what he believes, and Mike Cavell as well. He's in the Kaminsky camp, and we know Russell Stephen Edwards as well, who is in that camp and believes he's got evidence to prove that. I find all the arguments very compelling for both sides. I do like the water seeker for some reason. I do like the water seeker argument for me, but each to their own. I think it's just
absolutely.
I think it's very much each to their own. Anyway, we are going to take a quick break. When we come back, we have another candidate that we're going to take a little look at for being a candidate for being Jack the Ripper, and we're going to see if we can come to the conclusions of truth or fiction. Fact or fiction, I think is that one. On that note, we'll be right back after this.
Hello, Harry Price here. If there's nothing me and my friends enjoy more here on the other side, it is to sit back and relax and listen to the Paranormal Concept Show, right here on the PAUK Radio Network. Broadcasting a plethora of interesting and informative content for all your paranormal needs. Find them across social media to keep up to date with forthcoming shows and all their other adventures. Hello, is there anybody there?
And welcome back to the Paranormal Concept Show, exclusive to the Paranormal UK Radio Network. Now, before the break, we looked at Roanoke, we looked at James, the Voicelink, oh my God, I can't speak now, the Voicelink Manuscript, and we looked at one of the candidates for Jack the Ripper, H.H. Holmes himself. And none of us really kind of have been buying into that one. But there's another one on the table, James Maybrick. The Diary of James Maybrick was released, and everyone went, oh, he's admitted it. It is Jack the Ripper. But this one, again, it's like one of those, again, you've got the camps of people that believe this. Personally, I've read this book, not so much myself when you look into it. I honestly think he's not a particularly nice character. I think he maybe wishes he had been Jack the Ripper. I do think he maybe admired Jack the Ripper. And I think he wrote this, and I'm going to air quote, diary, to sort of give himself a notoriety that he doesn't deserve. Now, the diary is very long-winded. It's boring, quite frankly. But he does detail the murders and how he did it.
Okay.
Okay.
Except some of the facts that he's put in the diary were not correct, and it seems that the information he's put in there was information that was readily available from, guess who? The sensationalised media that were out there at the time. Other than that, there doesn't seem to be anything that backs up this theory that James Maybrick was Jack the Ripper, apart from this alleged diary that admits he was Jack the Ripper. What do we think, guys?
Well, there certainly does seem to be an undertone here. They're all related to diaries discovered long after the event, don't they? And, even I can remember sort of not all that long ago, was it back in the 80s or 90s when Hitler's diaries were discovered, and they were, there's there's a cottage industry in sort of touting around fake diaries or, people creating fake diaries and trying to slip them into whatever narrative they want to put these diaries into. And what with the internet and stuff, you can glean a lot of information about certain individuals now, even from quite far back in time. And to reproduce a diary, if you've got a bit of know-how of how to write it and do it, go for it.
Yeah, I mean, no one's denying...
I don't think that when this whoever did it was writing a diary, because you wouldn't want to leave evidence because you want to keep killing, and to write like, I don't know, 6th of June 15 whatever it was, right, killed someone today, met her in a pub, took her home, bludgeoned her to death, and then cut out her spleen and stuff. You wouldn't have none of that. Mm-hmm. It'd have to be like after the event, surely.
Mm-hmm.
So it wouldn't be a very good diary, would it? It'll be discriminating.
But there is a sort of argument, diary keeping was very common back in the day. People would keep a record of their daily events in diaries. That was quite a Victorian thing to do.
But surely that's things like, 7th of June 19 whatever, I went to the horse show today, very interesting, met Bert or whatever and got on really well, blah blah blah. Not, I met someone today and bludgeoned them to death and
well, you never know, do
just
you?
Just in case a policeman found it or something,
exactly.
It's all written down.
Yeah,
you wouldn't do it.
No.
Yeah, it does seem a bit unusual, I must admit, but diary keeping was a very common thing, though, I will admit that.
And incredibly interesting. I know that there's a person who lives down on the south coast that actually collects diaries, old diaries, and finds that a fascinating glimpse into everyday history. Not the big characters. It's a diary from anywhere and anyone of a specific time period, just because they find the whole era fascinating, and those diaries do bring out the real side of somebody's thoughts, feelings and emotions. You can buy them on eBay, actually. You can buy diaries past somebody's diary on eBay, which is amazing to me. Yeah.
Well, and there's certainly a lot of information to be gleaned from diaries. I mean, you look at one of our famous diarists, and Samuel Pepys, and the diary he kept, and that is quite a sought-after historical document. We have gleaned a lot of information from life in the late 17th century England.
I've
just
got
from
Mr.
his
Bean's
diaries.
diary.
It's a lot.
You've got who?
Mr. Bean's diary.
You've got Mr. Bean's. Okay. Now, oh gosh, the person who wrote the diary, James Maybrick, is not a particularly nice character. He calls his wife some very derogatory names within the pages of the diary, and his motivation for killing is actually the fact that he witnessed her in the arms of her unnamed lover in the Whitechapel area of Liverpool. So while he then went to London on a rampage for prostitutes in London, sort of again huge a bit of a leap there, but that's why he allegedly started killing. Now he does describe as I said before, he does describe the murders in depth of how he did it, why he picked that particular person, and he does end the book that says, I give you my name that all know me, so history do tell what love can do to a gentle man born. Yours truly, Jack the Ripper.
Right. It does seem to be sort of overly detailed, doesn't it? Again, yeah. Seems more of a flight of fancy on behalf of the author.
It certainly does. Now, before the diary actually came to light, as it were, his name had never been in the mix. James Maybrick was not a person that they would have considered, have even thought about in connection to being Jack the Ripper himself. It was only the supposed confession in the in this diary that made him a suspect. I don't think many people take this one seriously, but it has created in the past a dividing issue in the Ripperologist world. You know, they do love a bit of an argument, the Ripperologist world. I think the paranormal's bad for it, but I think Ripperologists probably take that crown, in all honesty. Now, the person who brought it to the fore was a guy called Michael Barrett. Now, he reckons he found the diary, and then he confessed that he actually forged the diary. But then decided that he hadn't forged it. So he sort of said, yep, I forged it. Oh, no, I didn't forge it. It's real. But then it's caused him, created a lot of money for him. And as I said, when you look at what's inside the diary, the contents, a lot of the information, there should have been things in there that would only have been known to Jack the Ripper. There wasn't.
Oh, so things like that are absent from the diary, are they?
Yeah, there's widespread, things that everybody assumes they know about Jack the Ripper killings that were put out there by the media are in this book, but they're inaccurate, there are errors. Do you know what I mean? And these are in the diary, which leads it to being fake. I mean, you wouldn't make those inaccuracies or errors if you were there.
No, that's right. Maybe that's why the press put things out, to try and catch people out.
It's been well known, and we've spoken to an author before that deliberately put a ghost story out there that wasn't. It was just made up, and that took legs. And he said it shocked him at how many people believed it. They didn't research further to see if there was any truth in it. They just regurgitated it.
Yeah.
So we know authors do this, and we know newspapers don't care. They'll make facts up to fit whatever narrative that they're putting out there at the time.
Yeah, to just give the story more legs and to continue the story.
I mean, to just talk about one part of it, the author itself gloats over how he placed. Oh God, this is quite gruesome. That he cut off her breasts, having kissed them for a while, and then set them down upon the bedside table. Well, that's not it. That didn't happen. Her breasts were actually found underneath her body at the crime scene, not on the bedside table.
How would they know that he kissed them as well? I mean, unless Jack the Ripper was wearing lipstick, I doubt they'd know that.
But I think that's where the author has used artistic license.
Yeah,
But I think that's his own fantasy going on there.
Yeah, it seems very fanciful. He certainly, whoever wrote it, and if it was contemporary to the time, I mean, which is not that uncommon, is it? I mean, whenever sort of serial killers are reported, and the Jack the Ripper case is not exempt from this, sort of people writing into the press saying that they are Jack the Ripper, well, the Jack the Ripper story is sort of full of letters and stuff, and one which we discussed earlier due to the H.H. Holmes one, the famous letter. I forget what it's called now. But,
Dear Boss.
Yeah, the Dear Boss letter, which is widely considered now to be a fake, and quite possibly even done by journalists themselves.
Yeah, these journalists have got a lot to answer for by the sounds of it.
Well, even to this day.
Even to this day. Now, there is another. It didn't end there with just the diary. I mean, it's as if there wasn't enough controversy surrounding the diary itself. There was another piece of memorabilia that linked Maybrick to being Jack the Ripper, and this was a watch. Now, in 1993, Albert Johnson purchased a gold watch, and inside he found, scratched inside, was the initials of all the victims, James Maybrick's signature and the words, "I am Jack."
Okay.
Right? Now, the scratches have been found to be compatible with the right period in time.
Yeah.
Although, with any of these kind of things, I would say it's probably... it's disputable, isn't it?
Again,
How can you verify that fact to dates? You could maybe say, the scratches are around the 1800s, but not... I mean, bearing in mind this was 1993, this was found.
I'm quite surprised, an engraving, unless there's sort of like the writing sort of style of the engraving. I mean, quite how you can date an engraving is, a bit beyond me.
Well, very clever scientific analysis these days. It's very an intriguing science.
They obviously have to take their word for it on that, I suppose.
So basically, so they're saying that was his watch, and he had to have an engraving saying "I am Jack." So we've established he wears lipstick and he's very forgetful.
But it's just an accompaniment to the diary, isn't it? I mean, it's too convenient.
It would be interesting to see if the person who found the diary, Michael Barrett and Albert Johnson, were actually linked in some way.
Yes, I think more background needs to be done in that sort of regard.
It would be very interesting to find out, quite frankly. But the fact that it appeared at the same time, around the same time, as the diary was made public, that's a red flag to me.
Yeah, all that we've found. Yeah, they're trying to. It seems that they're trying to back up something with something which people know can be sort of faked relatively easily, a diary, but they're trying to link an artifact of some sort. And,
diary's getting too much controversy. People aren't believing it. Let's back it up with something else. I don't know. I say it's very much in contention. Personally, I don't believe that for a minute, in the same way as I don't believe H.H. Holmes is a candidate for different reasons. Completely don't believe it. But I say, I don't know. I'm not an expert.
No, I don't.
No.
But I would say on both of those, they are no-goes. And again, you have to look at the facts and, the stories that build up around it is what holds it together, really. It's the story that's not being backed up by fact, right?
Yeah. It is too ambiguous. It's too, it's too out there.
For my liking.
For perverting the course of justice.
It contains all the known juicy bits, so to speak, but there's nothing of substance to back it up.
Not at all. Now, I'm going to come more modern now, because this is one that hit the paranormal field in a massive way. This is actually to do with the painting.
Ah, yes.
It's called the Crying Boy painting.
Oh, that one.
Don't we just love the Crying Boy painting?
No.
Pops up everywhere.
Get prints of it to this day.
Yeah, well, quite resurgent. I wish I had the copyright to print the Crying Boy painting.
Well, maybe you don't want this. Maybe you don't want this painting.
Oh, well, tell us all, Kerry.
Well, there are strange happenings around this painting. So much so that in 1985, the Sun newspaper reported that multiple fires have broken out and the house has been razed to the ground, and the only thing left unscathed was the Crying Boy painting. Dun, dun, dun. Well,
all the suspense of it all.
My goodness me. Now, they are responsible for the whole shebang, basically, on this Crying Boy painting. They just basically took a load of stories and put a cry out in the newspaper. If you've got one of these and any strange things have happened around the house, blah, 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 let us know. And, of course, the Sun readers came through with an abundance of tales. I think my favourite was from a couple Oh no, actually, there was one I read where they blamed somebody, and how this happened is just a miracle. Is that they got their testicles caught on a hook on the wall that the crying boy painting had hung from.
Well, he must be standing on a ladder. Or it must
I
have
think that story was a load of bull.
Yeah.
Do you really?
Yeah, it's all cock and bull. Yeah.
In fact, just about every disaster that befitted any family that owned the Crying Boy painting was actually put down to the curse of the Crying Boy. And it was just, and the Sun, how wonderful of the Sun, absolutely amazing of them, decided that in their compassion and empathy for their readers, they would do them the honour of taking all of the paintings and getting rid of them for these people, so these people weren't cursed by the curse of the Crying Boy. Now they got 2,500 prints of the Crying Boy sent to them.
That is quite an astonishing amount, actually.
I know. It's quite amazing, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
And basically, they did a big bonfire, made a big deal out of this. Hey, we're not scared of the curse of the Crying Boy. We'll get rid of him for you. We're going to do a big bonfire, take loads of photos with our page 3 girls tending said fire. And,
Sounds like good fire.
Oh, it sounds like, it sounds absolutely brilliant. Yeah.
A good bit of marketing and publicity for this paper.
You've got to love the
They love that.
You've got to love the Sun, haven't you? Newspaper, absolutely. Anyway, they organised mass bonfires for these paintings. I would just like to say they all did burn.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Now, this has been looked at quite extensively over the years. In fact, a guy called Stephen Punt was investigating the curse and actually came to the conclusion that the prints were actually treated with a varnish containing a fire retardant. Now, remember, right, you've got to go back in time. Nowadays, we assume everything in our house is fire retardant to a level.
Yeah.
Our furniture is, our walls are. I mean, asbestos. Hello, you know what I mean. There's lots of products now that are made specifically to standards because of the fire retardant.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but this varnish was probably a forerunner in the old fire retardantness, which is why it doesn't burn. So, if somebody has a fire and that doesn't burn, amongst everything else that did burn, which weren't fire retardant, then that could give you an answer as to why these prints weren't burning. Fire retardant doesn't mean to say it doesn't ever burn. It just means it's less likely to. It's harder.
I say, but the flaw in that idea is the fact that the Sun burnt them.
Well, have a hot enough fire, it's going to burn.
Anything will burn. I think it's all just a normal house fire. Mind you, I don't know quite how house fires go. I mean, you really need to speak to a fireman. But
no, I think the point of this is the majority of the fires were happening when the majority of furnishings weren't fire retardant.
Mm-hmm.
So when a fire goes up, it's going to catch hard and quick because you've got a lot of fire ready, as it were, materials. Nowadays, fires do catch, but they're slower burning, gives you more chance to get out. And that's why we have smoke alarms and stuff like that. So we're not saying it's not going to be a fire. We're just saying it's slower. It slows it down. Yeah.
Because house fires have decreased over the years. They still happen, but they're not as common as what they used to be, are they?
Well, you've got to think of electrical safety. We don't use... Generally, we haven't got open fires in the houses anymore. It's all central heating. You know, there's a lot of things that have changed over the years in regards to how house fires happen. Even smoking is less in houses now to what it was back in day. Yeah. You know, when you think about... We're going back to the early 80s. You think about how we lived then. Yes, we had lots of different things. You were coming out of a lot. It was a very transitional stage, the 80s, in regards to modern living.
Mm-hmm.
And fire retardant materials, although were coming in, weren't quite in. This varnish was fire retardant, and we had a much more extensive, comprehensive fire system. In regards to the fire brigade. So the fire brigade were getting there quicker. Nowadays, that system of although we have a fire brigade, the system's changed politically. So we have more of a retained fire service rather than an on-station fire service. So there are lots of different factors in this. But back in that time, they had a station-based fire service. They would get to fires a lot quicker. They needed to, because there was less fire retardant materials and there were more house fires.
Right.
Okay, so you get there, you put out the fire. The only thing that's not touched is a fire retardant painting, which, if it had gone on long enough, would have caught fire.
Yeah.
But it wasn't, because of there's a lot of variables in this. And I do think the Sun made a great big sensationalised image of it, and a few cases may be built into mass hysteria over a painting that's not relevant.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and plus the painting does. You see the painting. It is quite an evocative sort of painting to look at, and it does have sort of like a slight dark side to it when you look at it. And plus, this wasn't the only painting. It was a series of paintings as well by this artist, wasn't it?
Yeah, the artist was Bruno Amadeo, but he used the name Giovanni Bregolin, and like Richard said, there was a whole mythology about who these children were and why he painted them. That goes back to he painted them. These children were refugees from World War II, I believe, and they were upset and whatnot. They were poor kids and whatnot, and that the child, the crying boy himself, his parents had actually died in a fire. And that wherever this kid stayed, fires would start. I'm thinking, I am a fire starter on this one.
Even sort of like just looking basically into that story, you have a young child that's gone through a traumatic experience, and if he's sort of like displaced and fire starting and wherever he goes, could be him doing it.
Well, possibly, or it's just a story that got made up.
Yeah. You can see both sides of that sort of story, but it's probably more than likely made up. Exactly,
particularly if you... I don't want to say this without... I don't want a lawsuit, basically, but the Sun's behind it, and I'm going to just leave that there. Allegedly. But even now today, people, talk about the curse of the crying boy painting and want people to take the painting off their hands. And, you can still buy them, is all I'm saying. $165, everybody.
Oh, right. Is that what they're fetching now? Oh, dear.
Apparently so. You want a curse painting? Go and buy a print of the crying boy. Not.
So it'd be handy in the winter, wouldn't it?
Well, yeah. It's slower to burn. Now, we have called this show Away with the Fairies. Some of the stories we've already told you, seems like some people have been already away with the fairies in their belief systems or how they've viewed certain things. But we can't not talk about this one. This one's quite, again, prevalent in the paranormal field. It's the Cottingley Fairies, famed by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who believed this wholeheartedly, right?
Well, he didn't actually start out, really, did he? He was a bit sceptical, but when he went for it, didn't he?
He certainly championed these photographs.
Yeah.
Now, these the famous Cottingley Fairies were photographed by two girls, Elsie Wright and her cousin Frances Griffiths. Now, this was in the last days of the First World War, so we're going back to that time period, and in the 1917, 1918 period, isn't it?
Yeah.
And they reckon that they went down to the bottom of the garden after borrowing their dad's camera, and they started playing with the fairies and snapped a few photos. And he was, when the dad developed them, he was like, oh, we've got fairies in the garden. He believed they were birds, then sandwich paper, and he didn't think much of them. And it was quite.
I think he knew what his daughters were up to.
I know.
Of course he did.
He thought his children were playing tricks, refused to lend him the camera to them anymore, and, basically kind of believed that the girls were having a laugh, quite frankly. But the event was spoken about between friends and family as a lark, I would think. Yeah. And basically, Frances Griffith sent a letter to a friend in South Africa. Now, the letter itself is dated in 1918, and she actually included a photograph of the fairies. And she wrote, "I'm sending 2 photos, both of me, one of me in a bathing suit in our backyard. Uncle Arthur took that, whilst the other is me with some fairies up the beck. Elsie took that one." Now, the letter's very matter of fact. She doesn't sort of say it was a joke. She just sort of puts it out there, right? And, the letter goes on in normal fashion. Anyway, this got picked up. Somebody took this to the Theosophical Society in Bradford.
Right. Yeah. Well, there's a huge movement of the Theosophical Society. It was sort of like the sort of dawning of that sort of mainstream occultism sort of hit the UK and the world in general. I believe it was brought over by Madame Blavatsky, I believe, and and there was a lot of people involved in the Theosophical Society at the time.
Yeah, they looked at things like the occult, astral projection, memories of the past life, and Elsie's mother on this particular day had gone to a talk on, funnily enough, fairies, right? And she just happened to mention that her daughter and niece had taken some photographs of fairies. That's what she did.
As you do.
As you do,
Oh, I suppose if you are if us three, if somebody got in contact with the radio station and said, I've got a photograph of sort of something, would you like to see it? We would probably say yes, wouldn't we?
Yeah. Well, of course we would.
Especially if it's a talking mongoose.
Well, yeah.
Well, there is a talking mongoose in this somewhere as well. No. Now, these rough prints moved their way through the circles at the Theosophical Society and came to a notice of a guy called Edward Gardner. Now, this was around the 1920s. Now, at the time, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle was writing for the Strand magazine and was asked to write an article on fairies for their Christmas edition. Because Christmas, fairies, goes, right?
What more do you need?
I know, yeah. Well, he was actually preparing for this in the June. So they were well ahead of schedule. Now, he heard about these photographs, contacted Gardner, borrowed the copies. Now, he was initially on his guard. So he showed the prints to Sir Oliver Lodge, a guy who was, very interested in cyclical research. Oliver Lodge went, "They're fakes." Right?
Yeah.
No problem. Now, this is in the days before we have, digital, editing and stuff like that. So, I have to say, though, if you look at these photos now, you just laugh at them. He said he thought that the fairies' outfits and styles were too Parisian.
Oh, right. They're quite fashion-conscious fairies, perhaps.
Yeah, very French fashion. Yeah, basically. And nobody really was bothered about the original photographs. So obviously these are all prints that they're looking at. So it's only the prints that have been looked at. And that's what appeared in the magazine. Now, Arthur Conan Doyle, his interest is piqued at this point. He's like, I've seen the prints, I've written my article, so I'm going to, send someone to actually go and have a look at the originals, and sent a guy called Gardner to Cottingley in July. He reported that the whole Wright family seemed honest and totally respectable, which, in fairness, they probably were.
Yeah.
Returned with a camera and left them with Elsie and Francis and hoped them to take more photographs. Your dad won't lend you them, but I'll lend you a camera.
Yeah. And here you go, girls. Fill your boots.
Yeah.
You can imagine it, can't you? Now, the article itself appeared in the Strand and sold out within a few days. And basically, it was due to this photographic evidence that fairies exist. But, as with anything like this, it's like, oh, you know, you take a photograph and you capture a ghost. It's majorly controversial, isn't it? You've got always people that go, oh my God, that's amazing. And then you've got the other people that go, that is so fake. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You've always got this controversy from people. And, yeah, I have to say, looking at the photos now, you go, they're definitely fake. Now, the plates that were left with the girls, it's plate photography, remember? Elsie and Francis took 3 more fairy photographs, funnily enough.
Oh, they came on demand then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, dear. Now, when you look, as I say, when you look at it, the father returned them to London, wrapped in cotton wool. Arthur Wright was greatly puzzled. He understood the photographs were fake, and he couldn't understand what all this was all about. And, you know, he's like, my daughters are faking this. This is incriminated evidence. Yet you lot are all really into this, and I'm really confused.
You can imagine him sort of sitting down and with his wife at the dinner table, thinking, "What on earth's going on here? What have those two got us into now?"
Yeah, my daughters.
I think the reason it duped so many people is because, again, you know, at that stage in time, there was a lot of exploration. New things were being discovered all the time, and you would have pictures of weird and wonderful things in newspapers saying, "Look what we've discovered this week," sort of thing. So then to have fairies amongst them,
well, yes, I can certainly
would be the norm, wouldn't it? It'd be the normal.
I can certainly see where you're going through with that, Paul, and also, I mean, a lot of sort of like lay people would not have had an understanding of photography. You know, you would have just seen the pictures. But whereas now most people do know how photographs sort of work, and even the old sort of, you know, the film photographs, you do have a fair idea of the process involved and how they can be manipulated easily.
Exactly. It just can't understand why these people are being, you know, in his opinion, the father's opinion, this is, duped. You know, all these scientific and academic people are being duped by these images that these girls, who aren't very clever girls, are being, you know, like, how are they such a sensation? But Conan Doyle is using pseudonyms for the girls at this point. He's not actually putting their names out there. So he's sort of like, well, we're not getting press attention on our doorsteps. Yeah, he's protecting them. So that's sort of that. Now, the last exhibition was made to Cottingley in the August of 1921, and clairvoyant Geoffrey Hodgson had been asked to verify any fairy sightings. Now, on this day, the fairies didn't want to come out to play.
Oh, no.
It's a surprise.
Is it raining or something?
I don't know, but they refused to be photographed. And both Hodgson and Elsie stated they had seen them.
Right.
But the girls later did admit to deceiving Hodgson and pointing out fairies where none was seen. It's a bit like, did you see that? Did you see that?
Oh, over there. Yeah, we saw that.
That sounds like a ghost hunt to me.
It does, doesn't it? I know, right? And he went, oh, yeah, I saw that, thinking, what am I supposed to have seen? But this is, you know, a concept we're talking in paranormal. Paul brings a good point up. Did you see that? Sometimes people go, yes, when they didn't.
Oh, yeah. That's quite cool.
It's quite a common psychological phenomena that is almost like a hysteria between the group. It's like fear spreads. If one person acts fearful in a group, it spreads. It's a phenomena that's well known, and it's something you have to be very careful of, right?
Yeah.
I think we've all witnessed it on paranormal investigations as well.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
So he said he saw them when he didn't see them, and, you know, there you go. There were many that didn't believe it. They said that there was no third party when any of the photographs were taken, and they also pointed out that Elsie could paint and draw quite well.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so again, red flags all over the place here, right? But then again, things don't act like performing monkeys. You can't, you know, just because you've managed to take the photograph or whatever, doesn't mean to say it wasn't there. It just means that we can't back it up and, you can't take it with another person. I don't know, it's a difficult one, that one, isn't it? However, if fairies were real and being allowed to be photographed with the girls, you would think they would be open to being photographed with somebody other than the girls.
Well, yeah. I mean, it is, it's quite suspicious. That in itself, they only appear when the girls are around. And, they tend to appear. There's no evolution in the photography, is there? It's not as if you had photos before this. Sort of, there's no sort of blurry sort of photographs. People are claiming to be fairies and stuff like that, and then suddenly it just lands on your doorstep, fully formed, classical looking fairies.
It's a bit like, it's like a personal experience, isn't it? It's like the girls are saying it's true. A lot of people are thinking it's so not true, but we don't know how you did that.
Yeah,
we know. Again, you've got to take the time frame into consideration, because there's no digital. This is plate photography.
Yeah.
So you can't add images in afterwards and stuff like that. So you have got to. How did they do it? I mean, James Randi thought that maybe they used strings.
Okay.
For the fairies. But they really examined those photographs. This was in 1978. They really examined the photos. See, even 1978, they're looking at it. I can't believe that in 1978 they're still even considering that this could be a thing and trying to prove it's wrong. When nowadays you only have to look at it and go, yeah, all right. Do you know what I mean?
Actually remember
3D printer.
I can actually remember the TV program back in 1978 when they revisited this story. It's the first time I ever come across it, and it was still debated then. It was on a show called Nationwide, which was a UK like a evening news magazine program. But I do definitely remember seeing the article when they run it.
I know, it's funny, isn't it? How somebody as sceptical as James Randi would even give this the time of day now. Well, but in 1978 he seriously looked at this, and couldn't explain it, but kind of was like, I know that this is fake, but I need to prove that this is fake because there's so many believers out there on this. But it's just, when you look at things, the point of a pin in the gnome's midriff, in one of the fairies' midriffs, was, according to Conan Doyle, umbilicus, and therefore proved that birth in the fairy kingdom was a similar process to human birth. Right, but it wasn't. It was a pin mark. You know what I mean? Things like this. These are points that serious experts are arguing on. This is the silly part about it. Now, oh dearie me, there are things like Elsie was a much better photographer than Frances. She knew more about cameras than Frances did. So when you've got photographs that are taken by Frances and not Elsie, there are things that are a bit different in that because they're not so good, and that's down to camera slants, although believers are attributing things like that to psychic elongation. So psychically that it's a blurred or a non-proportional photograph because of psychic means, not because the camera was the
photographer was not psychically aware enough.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, how strange. It's laughable now. In 81 and 82, a guy called Joe Cooper interviewed both Frances and Elsie in an article for The Unexplained, and then Elsie did admit that all the photographs had been faked. They had used a series of illustrations by a guy called Arthur Shepperson as a model from which Elsie constructed the fairy figures. Frances also admitted the hoax, claimed that the first 4 photographs had been faked, but to throw a little, what's the word, something into the mix, said that the 5th photograph was actually real. Both of them said that they had both indeed seen real fairies near the beck, but the photographs were faked, although in real life they had seen them and the 5th photograph was real.
Right.
When asked in 1971 for a BBC TV, they said, are they trick photographs? Could you swear on the Bible about that? Elsie actually said, I would rather leave that open if you don't mind, but my father had nothing to do with it, and I can promise you that. So at that point, she wouldn't admit it. So you've got this, you know, don't you look at the photographs now of the Cottony fairies? You can, in my opinion, they look flat. They're not 3D figures, they're 2D figures.
Yes, I've actually sort of seen the ones. It must have been from this unexplained article. I can remember seeing a TV show when they actually pulled out the actual cuttings they actually use, and they are just paper cutouts, propped up, I should imagine.
That's what it looks like.
And that's what they look like in the photographs.
That is what they look like in the photographs. But it doesn't change the fact that your belief system comes under huge scrutiny in all of these cases that we've talked about tonight. Your belief system is the overriding deciding factor in whether or not you believe it or not.
Yeah.
People to this day believe fairies are real and exist. There's a whole industry, Fairy Fest goes on even to this day. People dress up as fairies. They believe in the fae. They believe in elementals. They have a belief system that there is something multi-dimensional beings that interact with us today. Even in the occult, we were at a talk. Richard and I went to a talk last year.
Oh yeah.
Listening to an incredibly learned man who works in the occult. Can't remember his name off the top of my head.
John, someone was it?
No.
I'm trying to think.
Can't remember his name. Anyway, and he said, working with these entities are easy. Don't deal with the fairies. They're tricky.
Yeah, he was quite adamant on that, wasn't he?
He was very, very adamant. So it's all down to your belief system, I believe.
Yeah.
I don't believe in these photographs.
No. I mean, you know, you just have to take one look at them. But again, we are looking at them through modern eyes, aren't we? And any sort of person that sort of does say, oh, they might be real, you know. I mean, you daren't, you know, because they have been proved what they are. But again, very contemporary for their time. They show what people quite possibly wanted to see back in the early 20th century, the perceived perception of what fairies were.
I think you also have to look at the rise in spiritualism and belief systems in regards to things like this at the time as well, just coming off the back of World War One.
Oh, there was certainly a huge interest, a huge wanting for this to be real. Just for, you know, you would have had a nation, you know, in bereavement, you know, shock after the First World War, and any sort of sign that there was sort of some sort of afterlife or something would have been comforting for a lot of people, or the nation as a whole.
And that drips down. It's not just becoming a belief in the afterlife, it becomes a belief in something more than we know.
Yeah.
There's a hidden, a higher purpose to the horrors. We went through this. There has to be a reason other than the normal reason that we went through. So belief in lots of other things come to the fore, not just like in divination, seances, you know, for contacting the afterlife. I mean, you've only got to look at Helen Duncan. We've spoken about her before now. Trialed for information she was coming forward in a seance regarding something that happened in World War Two,
yeah, so thinking of a battleship, which she come up with during a seance. I mean, the event had actually happened, but the Ministry of Defence hadn't released the details, and that was what they were quite concerned about, and they certainly did follow it up.
Yeah, they certainly did. So you've got this whole mixed bag between, you know, again, folklore and you know, natural roots, and running alongside events that have been very traumatic for a nation as a whole. And then you get, you know, proof fairies exist come into it. And, you know, you're looking at it through very naive eyes because of the way photography was at the time. You know, fake photography wasn't as prevalent as it is today. We didn't have stock photos then. We had, you know, what was taken was taken. Whereas nowadays, even photographs you see in the newspapers, you can't guarantee of that exact time and space. And you've got different lenses now that affect photography and all sorts of weird and wonderful things. Yeah. And that's not even going into digital editing that we've got nowadays. It's a whole, you know...
you look at you look at most people's Facebook and profile and pictures, you think, hang on a minute.
Yeah, I've seen
They
that
don't
person
look
in
like
real life. Yeah.
They don't look like that in real life.
Good old filters, everybody, is all I can say. So, Paul, you've been very quiet through this Cottingley Fairy expedition. What's your take on this?
Well, I mean, it was something that interested me when I was little. Obviously, because it was fairies and mythical stories always sort of appealed to me. And that's sort of what got me into the paranormal. But yeah, I never really bought the fact that there was fairies.
So where do we sit with fairies? There are so many tales across the world of fairies, and I think the image everybody has in their head of fairies is Tinkerbell.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as from that aspect, no, I don't think fairies exist. However, I do believe in elementals, and they're sort of folklore, traditional fairies, aren't they?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I do believe that I have been on investigation and experienced an elemental. You know, it's just a really strange entity, really, because it's neither good or bad. It's just there. It just exists, and it's more of an energy. And you know, it depends on where you are. It's to what elemental you get. You know, earth, wind, fire, and all that. So yeah, I mean, I do believe they're about as energy forms rather than little people with wings.
I do think very few people totally dismiss a form of energy that is interacting and influencing on a day-to-day basis. And I don't just mean the the spiritual people. I think a lot of people, even my parents are the most level-headed people in the world, will do little things and experience things and go, oh, that was the fairies, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or, oh, this plant's supposed to be good for fairies. My mum, that was when we was like out the other day at a garden centre. Little things like that are very, I still think that they're very much part of our belief system. No matter what your belief system is, whatever you say you subscribe to belief system-wise, I do think these ancient belief systems are still quite deep-set and deep-rooted within people, and that's just in our culture, but stories abound across cultures across the world in regard to these kind of things, and I just think that's amazing. I just think that's suggestive of something more.
It certainly is something that is deep-seated in us all. The problem I have with it is actually sort of using the word fairies, because if any of my muggle friends listen to this podcast and hear me talking about he's talking about fairies, I mean, God, he must be away with them this time, but I'm sort of along the line of Paul, I don't like the classical image of fairies. That word is quite strong and emotive, and that does bring up, the little winged sort of things. But I'm more sort of your side on that, Kerry. There's certainly some underlying force, or whatever you want to call it, elemental. I mean, I'm prepared to go as far as elementals. I'm actually quite interested in that subject, and if they're sort of like a form of a fairy, then so be it.
It's a tricky one, isn't it? And like you say, let's talk about that word, fairies. It's, I don't like that word, because I think whenever you say that, the mental imagery straight away is the Tinkerbell kind of image that people have in their brains. And that's not a true representation of age-old folklore regarding fairies. I remember I spoke to Mark Norman regarding this subject, and there's a high percentage of encounters with what would be classed as fairies actually being coming as living, breathing, well-dressed individuals, but there would be something different, something strange about them, not little winged creatures that are cute and have a little wand. You know what I mean?
There's almost sort of like a Men in Black quality to them, isn't there? The way Mark Norman, because I remember listening to that podcast and the way Mark Norman explained them. And again, they're sort of a representation and throughout history evolved. But we're still stuck in this 18th sort of century sort of vision of fairies, whereas during the 17th century, which I believe was where that sort of like is what Mark Norman was actually talking about, and their perception of fairies was very different, and they were very much like us.
Very much so. But I think nowadays, and I think partly down to the Cottony fairies, our mental imagery of what a fairy is supposed to look like is very from Victorian times onwards. I think it comes from that period, and it's not accurate when you look back in history regarding fairies. And that word, as both of you have said, you don't like the word because it gives you a false representation of actually what the subject is. Because you are thinking Tinkerbell kind of fairy.
Well, yeah.
And that's not a true representation.
And me and Paul are big, tough, good-looking guys, and we don't want to be associated with the fairies.
Because,
no,
like you said,
I've seen an elemental. Pretty sure it was an elemental.
My understanding of them is they form in what you would expect to see, and sometimes you'll see them mid-transformation in belief system, or if you've got several people, it can get blurred because they're trying to deal with everybody's belief system. So they sort of appear as you expect them to see them.
Yeah, well, I didn't expect to see it, and it was weird. It just looked like, something out of the Muppets.
I was out with Andy one evening doing a wood ghost walk for the team I'm with, and the guests were performing an experiment at the time, and me and Andy were stood back observing, and we believed that we were being observed by an elemental on that night. And that wasn't appearing as you would expect it to appear. It was very strange situation. Not bad, it just was back. It wasn't, getting involved. And then we did another thing in Epping Forest as well, where we was doing a human pendulum experiment, which we know is a psychological experiment, but some of the questions, the answers to some of the questions that were being asked was something that you were thinking, not now, mate. Appreciate that you're a watcher in the wood, but not now. You don't involve. That's not what we're here for. We'll come back when it's less public and talk to you then. But it was all about interest in what we were doing and not malevolent in any way, shape, or form. It was
that's it. I mean, I don't.
Interesting.
I don't think they're a negative entity or a positive one. They're just there. They've got their own little jobs to do. They get on with it. They keep out of people's ways, and in the experience that I've had, it's actually been trapped, I feel. And it just can't get out, but it does sort of interact, but from a distance. It's like watching people, what are you doing, sort of thing, and I believe that what I saw was sort of, as you said, mid-transformation, or at least confused transformation, because there was a few of us there, and we actually caught it on video.
Yeah, it's interesting. Interesting piece of footage, definitely.
Oh yes,
I can't explain it. We even went back a couple of days after, just as a private group, and there was only 4 of us there, and we couldn't explain what it was. We had a look at where it appeared. There was it appeared sort of behind a screen, and you could just see it through the gaps, peering through. But there was no room behind that screen for anything to be there. It was just strange all round.
Yeah, that piece of footage,
it was an elemental.
And certainly is interesting, and it certainly was sort of because it appears to be startled, and once it knows it's been observed, it moves away pretty damn quick.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Anyway, on that note, whatever your belief system is on any of the subjects that we've talked about tonight, I think we've highlighted the fact that you can't always believe the initial response or initial report that you read, that you have to dig a little deeper, and actually maybe there is a logical or rational explanation behind it. That's it, guys. We've actually come to the end of the show.
Wow.
That was quick.
That was a quick one. Enjoyed that.
It was, and maybe we will revisit the subject of fairies again in the future in more depth. On that note, you can catch up on any of our blogs that we write or our past shows on paranormalconcept.com website. We write regular blogs, don't we, guys?
We do.
Yeah, that's right.
And if you want to catch up with our day-to-day business, can go over to our Twitter or our Facebook accounts, Paranormal Concept, obviously. On that note, say good night, guys.
Good night, guys.
Good night, guys.
For businesses around the world, today isn't a restart, it's a rethink. That's why they're partnering with IBM. Retailers are keeping their systems up as millions of orders move online. Call centers are using IBM Watson to manage customer questions with AI. And solutions built on the IBM cloud are helping patients receive trusted information. Today we're rethinking how business moves forwards. Let's put smart to work. Visit ibm.com/smart/UK to learn more.